In this lesson, we're going to solve quadratic equations by factoring and using the zero product property. The first thing that we need to jot down is the standard form of a quadratic equation. My standard form is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. What's really important about this is the equals 0 part. So standard form, we always have all of our stuff on one side, and then we equal 0 on the other side. Now, the zero product property is a property that we use in math. 0 is a number. Product is the result of a multiplication problem. And so my zero product property says if I multiply two things together and I get 0, that means that one of the things I multiplied had to be 0. So let's think about that. 27 times 0 is 0. 3,782 times 0 is 0. Anything times 0 is 0. So if two things are being multiplied together and they equal 0, then either the first thing is 0, the second thing is 0, or they both are 0. Something has to be 0. We're going to use this idea in order to solve quadratics today. Here's our first example. I have two things being multiplied together and they equal 0. What that means is that either this first thing, so 2x minus 3, has to be 0, or my second thing, x plus 4, has to be 0. This allows us to use the zero product property to solve for x. That's the whole point of Unit 3. We're solving for x. To get x by itself, I'm going to use my reverse order of operations. So I'm going to start by adding 3 to both sides. That gives me 2x equals 3. And then I'm going to divide both sides by 2. So x equals 3 over 2. That's one solution to this problem. My other solution comes from my other set of parentheses. I set that equal to 0. I solve. I'm going to subtract 4 on both sides. So x equals -4. What this means is if I plug in 3 over 2, or if I plug in -4, this equation would be true. These two things multiplied together would give me 0. Now this looks a lot like factors, right? We factored in Unit 2, and we're going to use factoring today to help us solve. Let's go ahead and look at number 2. So on number 2, I have 3 factors. I have 7, 2x minus 5, and x plus 1. Now, if I start with my first factor of 7 and I set it equal to 0, this doesn't make sense, right? 7 does not equal 0. Doesn't make sense. I can't solve. So a note you may want to jot down is we only use factors that have an x or a variable. That could be any variable. So we only use factors that have an x. This one doesn't have an x with it, so I don't care about this piece. We're going to go ahead, we're going to move on to our next set, which is 2x minus 5, set that equal to 0, and then x plus 1, and set that equal to 0. I'm going to go ahead and solve these two. This middle one to solve, I'm going to add 5. So I have 2x equals 5. And then I divide both sides by 2. And x equals 5 over 2. The last piece, I'm going to subtract 1. So x equals -1. Now a good check to see if you've gotten all of your solutions is however many x's you have in the beginning is how many solutions you should have at the end. So my original problem had 2 x's. That means I should have 2 answers, and I do. This 7 didn't give me an answer. I didn't care because it didn't have an x with it. So that part I don't need to worry about. Now on number 3, I have an x in front, and because I have 1, 2, 3 x's, I should have 3 answers. We're going to start by setting all of these pieces equal to 0. So x equals 0. 4x minus 8 equals 0, and 2x plus 5 equals 0. Now this first piece, x equals 0, x is already by itself. I don't have to do anything, so that's one of my solutions. Go ahead, pause the video, you find the other two, and then play the video to check your answers. All right, so let's go ahead, let's check in. To get x by itself here, I'm going to add 8 to both sides, and then I'm going to divide by 4. 8 divided by 4 is 2. So that's one of my solutions. My other one, I'm going to subtract 5 to start, and then divide by 2, and so x should be negative 5 over 2. Again, I have 3 x's in my original problem, so I should have 1, 2, 3 answers at the end. Now, we're going to kind of put together what we did in Unit 2 with what we just did right now. I'm going to give you something, we're going to factor it, and then we're going to set our factors equal to 0 so that we can solve for x. Let's go ahead and look at the first one. We have 4 steps to solve. My first step is I need to make sure that my equation is equal to 0. So we're going to set our equation equal to 0. That means I need to be in standard form. Everything needs to be on one side. And this one, number 1, is not like that right now. The thing I need to move is the 5x. And in order to move it, I'm going to subtract it to the other side. Now pay attention and make sure you're combining this with the right piece. So this x is going to go with this x in the middle. And whenever I do that, I'm left with x squared minus negative x minus 5x gives me negative 6x minus 7. These canceled out, that was the point, and now I equal 0. Once we equal 0, now we can factor. This kind of factoring is bow tie. I have 3 terms. I'm going to put factors of my front number on the left, so in this case it's 1s. And then I need factors of 7 on the right. Now my only option for 7 is 1 and 7, so I know those have to go there. And then I need negative 6. So because I need negative 6, my bigger number 7 needs to be negative. Positive 1 minus 7 gives me negative 6. Whenever we write our answers with bow tie, we write them straight across. So I should have x plus 1 and x minus 7, and then we still equal 0. My third step is to set my factors equal to 0. So factors are your pieces in parentheses, and I'm going to set each one of those equal to 0. And then my last step is to solve for x, or to solve for the variable. To get x by itself on the left, I'm going to subtract 1. That gives me x equals negative 1. And then on the right, I'm adding 7. So x equals positive 7. And that's it. So we got to get everything on one side so that we can factor. Then we set our factors equal to 0. And finally, we solve for x. Let's go ahead and look at number 2. Now, number 2 is already in standard form. I don't need to move anything over. I already equal 0. We're good to go. And now I need to factor. Looking at these 3, I recognize that they all have something in common. So I'm going to start by taking out a GCF. Now, my GCF between 18, 15, and 12 is 3. They all have an x. And my smallest exponent is 1. So 3x is what I'm dividing out from these 3 pieces. 18 divided by 3 is 6. X cubed divided by x is x squared. Remember, we subtract those exponents. 3 minus 1 leaves me 2. Negative 15 divided by 3 is negative 5. X squared divided by x, 2 minus 1 is 1. Negative 12 divided by 3 is negative 4. And then x and x cancel. Now I'm not done. This was my GCF part, but the thing in parentheses still factors. Go ahead, pause the video. This one's bow tie again. I want you to try to find those factors and hit play whenever you're ready. All right, let's check in. Let's see what worked. On the left-hand side, you should have 2 and 3. And then on the right, you should have 1 and 4, and let's just verify that. 2 times 4 is 8, 3 times 1 is 3, and those do subtract to give me 5. Now, because I need -5, my bigger number, my 8, needs to be negative, which means my 4 needs to be negative. Whenever we write our answers, we write them straight across. So we should end up with 2x plus 1 and 3x minus 4. The other thing I can't forget is I have to bring down that GCF, and then we equal 0. Now I'm going to take all of my pieces and set them equal to 0, all my factors. So 3x equals 0, 2x plus 1 equals 0, 3x minus 4 equals 0. Again, pause the video, you find all of your solutions, and then play the video to check your answers. All right, this first piece I'm going to divide by 3. My 3's cancel, and I'm left with x equals. Sometimes 0 divided by 3, we want to say 3. Think about if I have no pizza and I divide it among my 3 friends. All my friends have no pizza because we had no pizza. So still 0. 0 divided by anything is still 0. All right, this next one I'm going to subtract 1 and then divide by 2. So x equals -1/2. And then the last one, we're going to add 4. And then divide out 3, and so x equals 4/3. And those should be your 3 answers. Again, I can verify I had 1, 2, 3 x's. I now have 1, 2, 3 solutions. So just make sure that those match. All right, next one, number 3. This one's already equal to 0 as well. I don't have to do anything here as far as moving pieces around, so we can just go ahead and jump in and factor. Now this one is 2 terms, and 2 terms I either have squares or cubes. In this case, my exponent 4 is divisible by 2 and not 3, so this is squares. I also can take the square root of 25. Whenever we do difference of squares, we write them twice, and then our signs are 1 or plus and 1's minus. The square root of x to the 4th is x squared. The square root of 25 is 5. And again, 1 is plus, 1 is minus, and I equal 0. From here, I'm going to set my factors equal to 0 so that now I can solve for my variable. Now this looks very similar to what we did in 3.2. So whenever we're solving and I have a square, remember we're trying to isolate x squared first, and then we take the square root. So I'm going to start by subtracting 5 on both sides. X squared is -5, and then we take that square root. Left-hand side, my square root cancels out my square. I'm left with x. And then right-hand side, lots of things to remember here. First thing is whenever we add a square root in, we need that plus minus symbol. Because I'm taking the square root of a negative, I'm going to have an I in my answer. And then the square root of 5 doesn't simplify. It's not a nice number, so we're just going to leave that as square root of 5. The second one's very, very similar. I'm going to start by adding 5 to both sides. That gives me x squared equals 5. Then I square root both sides. My square root cancels out my square. And then the square root of 5, I added that in, so I need the plus minus. Square root of 5 doesn't simplify, so I bring that down. This one does not have an I because I'm not taking the square root of a negative number. So it's only whenever we take the square root of a negative that we have that I in there. Remember, you can write your I at the end as long as you make sure that it's on the outside of your square root. It shouldn't be underneath. All right, last one. First thing here is I am not in standard form, right? I don't equal 0. I don't have all my pieces on one side. So in order to move things, I could move my 2x cubed and 3x squared over to the right-hand side, or I can move -8x and 12 to the left. Now the reason I'm going to add my 8x and subtract my 12 over is because I want to keep whatever my first term is positive. So my first term in this case is my x cubed. That's my biggest exponent. It's positive over here, so I'm going to move these pieces to the left. That gives me 2x cubed minus 3x squared. And then again, because this was minus, to move it, we do the opposite. So I'm going to add 8x. My 12 was positive, so the opposite is to subtract. I'm going to subtract it over, and now I equal 0. Everything's on one side. This is factor by grouping. Go ahead, pause the video, you factor, and then hit play whenever you're ready to move on. All right, we group. Group our first two, group our second two, and now we're just finding a bunch of GCFs. The GCF between 2x cubed and negative 3x squared, there's no number that goes into 2 and 3, but they both have an x. My smallest exponent is a 2, so I'm going to take x squared out of both of those pieces. We divide, I'm left with 2x, right? X cubed divided by x squared is x, and then minus 3. X squared is going to cancel each other out. Second set, my GCF between 8x and 12 is 4. I'm taking out positive 4, so I'm going to write plus 4. 8 divided by 4 is 2, and that x is hanging out. And then negative 12 divided by 4 is negative 3. Now I'm not done here with grouping. My sets of parentheses match as they should, so I write that one more time. And if I get rid of those, I factor them out, I'm left with x squared plus 4, and that's my other set of parentheses. These pieces now equal 0. From here, we set our factors equal to 0. So 2x minus 3 equals 0, x squared plus 4 equals 0, and now we're going to solve for x. I want you to pause the video, solve for x, hit play whenever you're ready to check your answer. All right, so let's go ahead, let's solve these two. I'm going to add 3 on this side. That gives me 2x equals 3. Divide out my 2, and x equals 3 over 2. My other side, I'm going to subtract 4. So x squared equals negative 4. To get rid of a square, I square root both sides. So I have x equals, lots of things here. I added a square root in, I need plus minus. I'm taking the square root of a negative, I'm going to have an I. And then the square root of 4, I know that. The square root of 4 is 2. So I'm going to put that 2 in front just because it looks funny to put it at the end. But x equals plus minus 2i. At this point, you should be able to complete your assignment. To remind you, we get everything on one side, we factor, set our factors equal to 0, and then solve for x. If you have any additional questions, please let your teacher know, and they would be happy to help you.